Where Loyalties Lie, Chapter 1, Assassination, by Loyalliar. Rainbow! You! The air rushed past Rainbow's ears, cutting out most of her friend's words. Down! I'm not... I'll take us down in a minute, Twilight! Rainbow Dash shouted back over the wind flying through her mane. We're not close to Carolot yet! No, The wind felt totally awesome. Awesome enough, even, to drown out the screaming unicorn behind her. Still can't hear you, Twilight! Hold on! Dash tilted her wings up and slid backward into a tight loop. It brought her head close enough to the cart behind her to hear Twilight over the wind. Just slow down! Wait! Please, don't! Twilight's words quickly devolved into a primal scream of panic. The last bit of her attempt to communicate was the result of a simple fact of cart pulling, with which Dash was not intimately familiar. This fact is summarized very easily. The cart goes wherever the leader goes. In this case, Twilight's scream came from Dash's loop, which rapidly turned into the cart's loop. Judging by her response, Dash didn't mind. Why would I want to slow down, Twilight? We're making great time, even by my standards. Because the cart is breaking! Twilight managed to shout back. Dash threw a glance over her shoulder, at which point she found herself caught between the guilty desire to laugh and the heart-stopping fear that her friend was probably about to die. Twilight was barely managing to stand on a pair of wooden planks, each attached to one of the ropes of Dash's harness. Nothing else remained of the admittedly ramshackle cart that they had left Ponyville with. Both planks looked like they wouldn't last much longer, and yet the image of Twilight skating through the sky, halfway to screaming, was priceless. Rainbow managed to choke back a laugh and focus on the very real problem. In her mind, there was only one solution. Don't worry, Twilight. I've got this under control. Dizzy sped up. Passerby in the densely populated park known as Carolot Square would later describe what they saw as a screaming rainbow fireball. Thankfully, a powerful voice was on hand to take control of the situation on the ground. Everypony, clear a path! Get out of the way! A towering unicorn stallion bellowed, even as his horn pulled some of the younger park visitors away from the area that would soon be Ground Zero. Meanwhile, in the air, Dash pondered why Twilight was screaming so loud. It was just a landing. She wasn't even going that fast. A deep and resounding impact, bearing resemblance to the noise a wad of dough makes when slammed onto a countertop, was followed immediately by a pair of soul-splitting cracks and a long scraping noise that ultimately evoked a feeling of giant nails on a half-mile-long chalkboard. When all the noise was done, the scene was marked only by its sights. They consisted of two young, out-of-town mares laying at the end of a trench 100 paces long, where the grass of the park had been brutally furrowed and ripped up. Smoke rose from the pile of cinders and splinters, and shattered planks that had formerly been a cart. Rainbow Dash stood up almost immediately, with a smile plastered across her face. That was awesome! Apparently, the sentiment was not shared by Twilight Sparkle, who rose to her feet with her mane slipped back into what could be best described as a purple streak behind her head. This change was accompanied by dirt and splinters covering her face from where she had rolled into the ground, and a generally sour expression. Dash forced her hoof to her mouth to stifle a laugh. Don't you dare laugh. Some pony could have been seriously hurt, Rainbow Dash! Thankfully, no pony was Twily. By the way, I love your new mane cut, Shining Armor muttered with an impressively straight face, as he approached from the distant, leering cloud. His amethyst-plated armor shone in the early morning light. Dash couldn't hold it any longer, as he collapsed to the ground again, rolling and laughing in the grass of Canterlot Square. Big brother! Twilight stepped away from the hoof full of broken planks that had formerly been her chariot, with a deep blush across her face. Shining Armor laughed as he rubbed a hoof across Twilight's head, achieving both a noogie and a quick mane-styling job in a single action. It's good to see you. Twilight? In the course of Twilight's reunion with her brother, Dash's rolling laughter had managed to get her quite impressively stuck in the straps of her harness. A little help? A combination of pink and purple magical auroras made short work of the knots, and Dash stepped away from the completely ruined pile of scrap that had formerly been a wagon. Good to see you, Shining Armor. You too, Rainbow Dash. The muscular stallion's gaze swept over the crowd, which was beginning to reassemble, before he turned to his sister. Should we head up to the castle? What about this? Twilight gestured toward the mess, and a crowd of now quite irritated onlookers, whose days in the park had really been interrupted. You aren't here to arrest us? Of course not. Shining smiled, before gesturing his head toward the palace that dominated the skyline overhead. I'll get some of the guards ponies to take care of it. Now let's go. Leaving behind the crash scene, the three ponies turned their attention to the equestrian capital. Canterlot was brimming with exactly the sort of snobby, nose-in-the-air ponies that made Daz's stomach turn on sight. Thankfully, the summertime sweaters and ironic scarves lasted up only to the drawbridge in the castle proper, where a pair of gold-clad guards kept the masses at bay. Shining Armor stopped at the doors of the castle to whisper something in one's ear. When he walked back to the two Ponyfield mares, Twilight gave him a quizzical glance. Say, big brother, were you waiting for us? I mean, don't you have somewhere better to be? Shining Armor put on a fake pouting face. Oh, Twilight, I thought I was your big brother best friend forever. Now you don't want me to spend time with you? Daz groaned as the siblings' antics continued. For just a moment, she was tempted to consider the idea of asking Twilight an egghead question, but a pang in the back of her mind told her it would be nicer to let things run their course. It was worth putting up their cheesy dialogue to avoid another collegiate-length lecture. As Shining Armor continued teasing his sister, he began to lead Twilight and Daz through the castle proper. While Twilight and the guards pony captain rattled on and on, discussing everything that came to mind, from the weather, to family, to magic, Daz's eyes remained focused on the palace. The architecture was beautiful, even if it lacked the comforting softness of the buildings back home in Cloudsdale. Everywhere were whites, golds, and purples, accentuated by stained glass windows, events Daz barely understood. Occasionally, she caught glimpses of something she had seen, heard of, or even lived through. Nightmare Moon, Discord, the Dragon Wars of the 20 Years Past, Changeling Invasion, Sombra, and so many more glass memories. It was strange to see Equestria's past unfold, and in a way, even stranger that so much of it was alien. The Pegasus's attention turned back to her friend and her escort only when they both stopped, at the foot of the tall staircase leading to a pair of aged golden doors. Twilight stepped toward the stairs, but then stopped, turning back to her brother. Shining, I appreciate you taking your time to show us around. I just don't want you to get in trouble for skipping out on your duties. Twilight, relax. I could get a little while off if I need to stay in touch with my little sister. And if there's a problem, I'm sure the princess will understand if I tell her I was ensuring the safety of her personal student. Actually, Captain, I'm quite inclined to believe that my faithful student can take care of herself. She's quite a competent magician, even if her talents aren't as martial as your own. Rainbow Dash, Twilight Sparkle, and Shining Armor jumped, all as one, and then dropped into bows. In the midst of their conversation, the towering form of Princess Celestia had managed to approach unnoticed from somewhere within the bowels of the palace. For her part, Celestia wore the smile of a giddy young filly, having pulled off a silly prank. The unquestioned ruler of Equestria wore her usual portrayal and tiara. The golden ornamentation served to highlight the pure glow that seemed to be her constant companion. None of you need to bow to me, please. You have all done for Equestria more than I ever could hope to repay. She paused while her three subjects rose to their feet. I've been looking forward to seeing you again, my faithful student. And you as well, Rainbow Dash. Captain Armor, I'm afraid I will have to relieve you of your guard for the time being. I'd like some time to speak with my student, as well as her companion. You should head back to your post. Of course, Princess. Shining Armor offered a stiff nod before turning to walk away. The embarrassment on his face was obvious, even beneath his helmet. The princess smiled with the same graceful smile that seemed to always accompany her features. Thank you, Captain. As for Twilight and Rainbow, if you will please follow me. Celestia turned, moving up the nearby staircase toward the golden doors at its apex. I would like to thank you for helping Twilight get here, Rainbow. When I heard that the train had broken down, I was worried I would have to reschedule my meeting with Twilight. And of course, Princess Luna will have missed her tonight. I'm sure my sister would have been equally pleased to see you for the ceremony. Ceremony? Daz asked. Twilight sighed. Des dove for the metaphorical trenches to brace herself for what she considered to be a very literal assault, in the form of one of Twilight's egghead explanations. I told you about this last week, Rainbow. It's why I needed to come up here in the first place. Princess Luna will be hosting the Royal Academy's Arcane Studies Award ceremony this year, and she invited me after reading some of my work on emotionally based harmonic arrays. Right, I remember. Sounds fun. So, what now? Celestia's smile didn't seem to actually change, yet it somehow took an obviously apologetic quality. To be brutally honest, Rainbow, my palace staff is largely busy preparing for tonight's affairs. I don't have much to keep a flyer like yourself interested, at least at the moment. If you could bear to sit with an old mare and her student for a while, I'm sure we could find a topic to discuss that you'll find bearable. After lunch, perhaps my sister can entertain you. I understand she's grown quite fond of racing. Des's face lit up like heartwarming lights. Celestia, for her part, threw a wink to Twilight, which went entirely unnoticed by the Pegasus racer. Not far away, Princess Luna paced in her room, staring out into midday as her silver-clad hooves tapped against the aging stonework beneath her. It seemed ironic that her dominion over the night did not allow her to get a good night's sleep. Instead, the opposite was true. Sleep never came to her. To a normal pony, that would likely seem a blessing, but she knew all too well the stresses that came with the sleepless nights and days of ruling and doubting, blending and mixing until she was unsure which was which. It had been almost 3 years since the end of her exile. In that time, one of her most important projects was repairing Celestia's influences on the magical education of her subjects. Her older sister showed such an unimaginative favoritism for what she termed practical, straightforward magic, that she never even seemed to consider the final parts of the arcane arts. That was to say nothing of her blunt power-first methodology to casting. It took a wholly unreasonable amount of tiny suggestions and private lessons to various tutors and graduating students, but her efforts had finally paid off. One of her own personal students, Cloudy Mirror, was finally being recognized for her contributions to Equestria's understanding of magic. It was a prestigious honor, and one she had every pride in her student for achieving. Unfortunately, Cloudy Mirror's idea of thanking Luna for her guidance was to set up the entire award ceremony in her honor, and put her in the spotlight in front of countless noble and magically educated ponies from all across Equestria. It was exactly that sort of recognition that would have meant the world to her 1,000 years ago. The unfortunate truth was that things had changed in 1,000 years. With a sigh, Luna stepped out onto her balcony and looked down over the whole of Equestria. As expected, it was a beautiful day, almost as somebody could control the sun itself, and really wanted her to have a good day. Yet another reminder of how blunt Celestia's methods were. Luna spread her wings, only to hear a soft cough from over her shoulder. The princess didn't need to turn to know that the voice belonged to one of the honor guard, tasked with protecting Celestia from harm, and now grudgingly also burdened with the protection of her sister. Luna hadn't even bothered to learn his name. "We do not require your company, guards pony." The stallion's bladed steel shoes made a series of sallow clangs upon the marble floor as he made his way across the bedroom towards the balcony doors. He stopped at the threshold, making sure to keep a respectful distance between himself and the princess. Luna had no fantasy that the distance was actually the product of any respect on his part. "I am tasked with protecting you, princess." "Does my sister think I cannot handle myself in danger?" Without waiting for an answer, Luna stepped up onto the edge of the balcony, and then leapt off, wings folded to her side to allow a faster fall. The shouting that followed her was immensely satisfying. "Princess, I have to request you to return to the palace immediately!" The guard bellowed over the rushing wind. Giving credit where credit was due, his focus on decorum was impressive in such a steep dive. Luna shot out her wings at the last moment, pulling up into a steep ascent that the Wonderbolts referred to as a suicide rise. She had to admit, she was disappointed that the Pegasus guard had not chased her. She spun to lose the last bit of momentum from her fall, and then pulled herself back up to the level of the balcony, where the guard's pony was waiting. "We are going to the Royal Academy to check on preparations for tonight. If you must, you may come along." No response. Not even a correction of the princess's entirely deliberate use of the royal plural was offered. Instead, the flight to the academy was quiet. Far below, however, the midday streets were filled with onlookers who couldn't help but notice how the indigo fur of the princess stood out against the bright summer sky. She could see them pointing, whispering amongst themselves. A few bowed. Others went about their busy ordeals. It was just as strange occurrence for the princess as for her subjects. But arrangements had to be made, and more importantly, Luna desperately needed some space for the overbearing care of the palace staff. At least one who seemed chained to her presence remained quiet. The rough stone walls of the Royal Academy passed beneath her, marking the last of the gawking onlookers. The building inside was a collection of thick round towers, much like the style of the palace, though more reasonably grounded, and with less by way of embellishment. Its wide, rough-grained stonework reminded her of the old castle, which lay now in ruins deep within the everfree forest. She caught herself neck-deep in nostalgia, and shook off the memories as quickly as she could. There were more important things to focus on. As Luna soared in for a landing, a stuffy-looking unicorn mare pushed open the front doors of the academy. The mare's eyes widened considerably as she caught sight of the approaching Moon Princess.
Your Majesty, we wasn't expecting you so soon. Aren't you a bit out of your element this hour?
If only we had traveled out in the midnight hours, we would be hard-pressed to ever meet any of our subjects, Luna responded. For a moment there was silence, as she waited for the correction that never came. It had become almost a hobby, even if the plural wasn't always a deliberate tease.
Yes, sir. My name is Crystal Ball. I am the head mistress here at the academy, and your sister's advisor on magical affairs. I have been so looking forward to meeting you. Can I get you anything, princess?
The entire speech was delivered with well-practiced graces that only served to make it clear just how many times the word had been repeated. The nasal accent with which they were offered made the last injections of the word completely clear.
Some sincerity,
Luna thought to herself.
I would like to see the arrangements for tonight's proceedings.
Crystal Ball nodded sharply.
Right this way.
Empty hallways led past empty classrooms and lecture halls, until finally coming to a similarly empty courtyard. Here, hundreds of cushions had been arranged in a series of sweeping arcs for an ornately decorated stage, emphasizing Luna's indigo, black, and silver theme. A handful of tables around the edges of the seating area offered refreshments, as well as showing off some of the more visually impressive work presented by the students at the academy. Luna's focus was shaken away when the mare, what was her name again, spoke up with another nasal inquiry.
Is there anything we could do to make it more fitting? I'm afraid I had to put Cloudy Mirror in charge of decoration, and he always proves so fond of theatrics. I'll be impressed if nothing collapses tonight.
It is magnificent.
Oh, you don't need to spare my feelings. Be honest.
Luna reined in her sense of awe just long enough to shoot a pointed glance at Crystal Ball, who seemed utterly bored with the whole ornate affair. The glare went completely unnoticed. As the red-coated mare rubbed a hoof against her chest, she shrugged.
Well, if you want to obtain anything, please do tell me before it gets too close to the event. And I trust you have your speech prepared?
Of course, Luna lied. Preparing a speech had not even entered her mind.
Good. Then if you follow me again, I'll show you to your box.
Again, the mare guided Luna and her silent guard toward the academy. They climbed a long spiral staircase until they finally stepped down into the balcony, emerging from the side of the academy wall. It was a good few hundred feet above the ground floor, the sort of a fall that would give a wingless pony vertigo. Above and behind her were the inclinations and pointed towers that topped the various branches of the academy structure. Gargoyles depicting all manner of fearsome creatures decorated the spaces around her, casting a maze of shadows now into just past noon sunlight.
Are we not a bit far from our subjects?
Luna asked, again, turning her attention to the seats far below.
I understand my sister generally sits amidst the other ponies. I thought this would be more to your style, your majesty, the headmistress answered, and I figured it would be a nightmare to be.
Her words trailed off at the sight of a spark in Luna's eyes.
Oh my.
Luna's response was controlled and soft, and above all, intimidating. Pray tell, a what? The subtle upward inflection of the last word, suggesting the pause between a bolt of lightning and a crack of thunder. The comparison was made perfectly clear when a bolt of lightning ripped the distant sky. Where it was truly from the princess's temper, only she could say.
That is to say, I imagine that both you and the guest might be more comfortable at a greater distance?
Crystal Ball edged backward as Luna's eyes began to glow. The control had disappeared. The thunder was shouted. We are no longer the dark beast that haunts the nightmares of fools! We! The slowly gathering darkness stopped when a gold-plated body stepped down between her and the cowering academic. His eyes were cold and stance ready for battle. She could have read his mind, but the way he looked at her told her everything she needed to know. They stood for almost an eternity, unmoving, as Luna was silently judged by a council of her own thoughts. There, before her, was a quivering, whimpering mare, who only saw the terror that Luna had once been, and the stigma she wished she could escape. Forgive me. Luna stepped away from the balcony, as a torrent of water surged from her eyes, yearning to burst free. To have fallen so far over a simple word, a slip of the tongue, should have been below her. The honor guard turned to Crystal Ball, placing a hoof on her shoulder. It's okay, ma'am. You're safe. The balcony will be just fine. The commander would prefer it anyway. Having said his piece, the guard stood up, walked back to Luna's side. We should leave. It took her an eternity to muster even the words to answer him.
Thank you. You are so very brave.
The guard's funny shrugged. It was scarier the first time. It took Daz almost 10 minutes to realize she was drooling over a 1000-bit Pegasus down pillow. Her interest in the conversation at hand had already passed. She has had her interest in the outside weather, the immaculately valuable pieces of furniture in the room, and even the phoenix sitting on a perch in the corner.
If I may, Twilight, I've had a long day of politics already, and I would love to move on to another topic. It seems Rainbow thinks the same.
Oh? Daz asked groggily, cocking her head at the mention of her name.
Sure,
Twilight answered, giddy in her own hake-headedness.
What do you want to talk about?
Daz's gaze moved lazily to the ceiling, where she saw a vast array of vines decorated with golden flowers. They climbed over the sort of mantle, which separated the room's plain white ceiling from its gold and silver walls. Buried amongst the vines were 4 statues of ponies Daz didn't recognize, along with more than a few hooffuls of other baubles and trinkets whose purposes he couldn't hope to discern.
Well, given the subject of the ceremony tonight, I was wondering if you could teach me a bit about illusory magic.
Teach you? Celestia's ever-present smile grew softer.
Illusion has always been difficult for me. In fact, my sister insists that I have let its study stagnate to the point of uselessness in her absence. I was hoping you might have learned something in your studies.
Well, yes, I guess I know a few things. Rainbow, come here. Daz's gaze snapped down from the ceiling when her name was called. At least something was happening. Yeah? If this is for magic, you can count me out.
Well, who else am I supposed to use? The princess is basically immune to my magic and...
Fine, whatever. Daz rose and paced forward. When she had taken up a spot near Twilight, she sat down. I'd really not appreciate not ending up as a stallion or a mouse or something, if it's all the same to you.
Oh, you don't need to worry, Rainbow. Illusion magic doesn't actually change anything. It just makes it look like something has changed. It's sort of like lying to the senses. For example, I could make you look...
Twilight's voice trailing off was accompanied by a glowing light around Rainbow Dash. Slowly, it grew into a blinding white orb that encompassed the Pegasus completely. The light lingered only for a passing heartbeat, before fading as though it had never been. So, what did you... Whoa! Dash was caught completely off guard by her voice. The primary reason for the surprise was that it wasn't her voice at all. Instead, it was surprisingly masculine. A quick cursory glance at her body informed her that the sound wasn't the only thing that changed. I'm a guard's pony?
Not just any guard's pony.
Twilight levitated a mirror from somewhere out of Dash's sight and set it down in front of her. What the Pegasus filly saw was a tall, powerful white unicorn stallion staring back at her with a smug grin.
What do you think, big brother?
I know I told you not to turn me into the stallion, but this could be pretty fun. Des laughed, with shining armor's voice, as possibilities poured into her mind. Make me do some magic, Twilight.
I can't, she answered. I mean, I could do magic, but it wouldn't look like it was coming from you. Illusions can't recreate other magic. Unicorn, Pegasus, or Earth Pony. If I turned myself into you, I couldn't fly, or even move the air by flapping my wings.
Oh well, Des muttered. I still could pull off so many great pranks.
Illusion is a fine and noble school of magic, Rainbow Dash. It isn't to be used for
Pranking! Twilight's horn ignited, and it took only a moment for Dash to return to her usual form.
I do hope you'll tell my sister that, Twilight,
Celestia muttered out of the corner of her breath.
Okay?
Twilight offered, before desperately trying to change the subject.
Anyway, illusion is all about control. It can fool any of the five senses, but it requires great focus to maintain. Most ponies can't keep an illusion while simultaneously using other magic. And why am I telling you this, Princess? You already know all of this, don't you? No, in fact, Twilight, I do not, Celestia answered. Illusion is one of the great holes in my magical talent, unfortunately. The fact is, my magic does not bend well to illusion.
What's that supposed to mean? Daz asked. Isn't it just magic? I mean, I'm a stunt flyer, and I can still fly long distance or altitude flying if I need to.
Ah, a topic that you and I can share while leaving Twilight out of the loop.
Celestia giggled a bit, earning an embarrassing blush from Daz.
I'm only teasing, Rainbow. What I mean is that a unicorn's magic is picky. It varies much more from pony to pony than wings do. I don't say this to sound like a braggart, but my possession gives me access to much more magical power, we call it mana, than any other unicorn. I can do magic that is beyond most other ponies, but it comes at a great cost to my control. I suppose a good comparison would be trying to fly with wings twice as long as your body.
Daz nodded. I guess it'd be pretty hard to do any stunts that way. Then her stomach grumbled in a desire for food. She had nearly opened her mouth to ask for some when the princess spoke up again.
Precisely. Also, some ponies favor certain branches of magic. Sorry about that. The distinction is based on their natural special talent, but I have a hard time explaining Culver's research without you dozing off. Not that I blame you.
Celestia rolled to her side, twisting the satin of her gold cushion.
Suffice it to say, illusions and I don't get along. I tend to put in too much mana. Things end up looking like a bad painting, if I'm lucky.
From there, Princess Celestia and Twilight embarked on a voyage discussing something about the conversation of mana over expensive something. Sitting around was back to being incredibly boring, but this time, the Pegasus was no longer tired enough to just take a nap. Her eyes drifted around the room, until they settled on the dense overgrowth of the ceiling. Dash spread her wings and began to gently flap upward toward the plants. 24 feet up into the tall ceiling, Dash found herself walking on the mantle amongst the statues of ponies and dense bed of vines. The domed ceiling concealed what would seem to be another whole room atop Celestia's ornate bedchamber. After looking at it for a moment, she realized that the room was designed like a mushroom, with a small stem where the egghead and princess were talking, and a cool, colorful overhead with tons of stuff to explore. Of course, the exploring could wait until she was done with her snack. She lowered her head to one of the golden flowers, and had nearly closed her lips when a voice interrupted her.
If you're hungry, Rainbow, you need only to ask.
Dash stopped mid-bite, stepping away from the flower with an embarrassed look. In an attempt to preserve her coolness, she walked over to the statue on the very edge of the canopy area and leaned against it, crossing her hooves idly. I'm sorry, Princess. I'm not really that hungry, though.
Of course not. You're bored. There's nothing to worry about, my little pony. I could go for something to eat myself, but I should warn you that those plants are quite poisonous. I know I probably shouldn't keep them where some pony might try to get a snack, but they look so nice, and I so rarely have company here anyway.
Celestia looked up to the maze of vines and plants, before settling her gaze on the statue against which Dash was leaning.
Commander, come here.
To Dash's utter shock, the statue responded. As it moved, she felt stone become fur and armor against her own coat. The Pegasus soared down in smooth flight, before folding his wings and landing without a sound. The perfect silence of his motion only served to amplify the grunt of pain that followed as his rear leg fell out from beneath him. Celestia stood from her cushion, as did Twilight, but the armored guard's pony was back on his hooves before either.
"You're fine,"
He muttered, in a voice that lingered on the voice of growling.
"What you need, princess?"
Are you sure you're...
"I'm fine."
He answered adamantly. Dash was struck by the one thing that set him apart from the uniform jet white of every other Pegasus guard he had seen. His armor. Much like Shining's armor's unique uniform, the stallion's armor was covered in what appeared to be a smooth coating of black gems, or perhaps some other material beneath a coat of lacquer. Only its darkness was assured. The armor sparkled only faintly, even the excellent lighting of Princess's bedroom.
"What you need from me?"
Its owner asked.
I'd like you to take Rainbow Dash to meet Princess Luna and send Lieutenant Flag in.
The guard's pony acquiesced with a hard nod.
"Come on."
As he growled in Rainbow Dash's direction, before limping in obvious pain toward the door. None of the officers commented on his distress. Dash jumped down and glided smoothly toward the open door. It slammed up behind her, fairly bluntly ending her conversation with Twilight and the princess.
"Follow me."
The guard's pony asked, in a voice that didn't ask at all, but instead demanded. He spread his wings and began to fly down the hallway, albeit at a walking pace. Dash followed on hoof, noting out of the corner of her eye how the other palace staff they passed, all three of them, gave her escort a wide berth. Though she would never admit it, Dash took some time to build up the courage to speak to him. In the time it took to prepare herself, they crossed what seemed like a pile of tangled passages and spiraled staircases, all in total silence. The stallion didn't seem like to talk to if he didn't have to. Asking him something like his name would probably just earn a scowl or a grunt. Instead, she tried something more interesting.
So, how did you do that statue thing?
"Ask the princess. It's her magic,"
he answered, just as briefly as Dash expected. She had another question prepared, but it slipped from her mind a mere moments later. The stallion landed before a pair of tall black doors, embossed with a swirling silver in the pattern of clouds. Without bothering to announce himself, or even knock, he pushed the portal open.
"After you."
Dash walked into the dark room to find it surprisingly barren. Rather than being divided into walls, the room was a perfect circle. A large four-post bed dominated one side of the space, and while the other had a simple desk of dark wood, flanked by a pair of nearly empty shelves. Opposite the entrance stood a pair of glass doors that opened onto a balcony overlooking all of Canterlot. One of those doors hung ajar, and behind it, Dash could clearly see Princess Luna, with her head hung low over the balcony's ornate marble railing. Her wings weren't really folded at her sides, so much as crumpled there. Her hair danced in the breeze of another world, obscuring her face. She barely moved. Despite not needing friends to identify the problem, Dash found herself wishing Fluttershy, Twilight, were present. Comforting other ponies wasn't exactly her thing. Gilda used to joke that she had some second special talent for putting her hoof in mouth. Unfortunately, Twilight was a long way through the labyrinthine palace, and Fluttershy even further. That left only one pony to whom she could turn. So, Dash did exactly that. When she turned around, the commander wasn't there. She glanced back out the door, into the hallway, but he hadn't fled. He simply vanished. That left her alone with the princess, who had still yet to look up to her midday view of the glorious capital of her empire. Dash walked across the length of the room, without further questioning. When the barely opened glass door stood before her, she pushed it open in what she thought was perfect quiet.
Leave us alone, guard's pony.
I'm not a guard's pony, princess. Luna's ears stirred ever so slightly that Dash found herself wondering if she had imagined a response.
Then you are brave to come here unannounced. Now leave us alone.
It was a perfect opportunity to escape. Leave the problems to somebody better suited to it. Dash ignored it. Not unless you tell me what's wrong. Luna looked up at the rebellious reply, only just for a sliver of an instant. Shock overwrote the melancholy inscribed on her face.
Redemption is hard to find in the eyes of other ponies, Rainbow Dash.
You mean Nightmare Moon? Luna gave no response, though Das didn't seem to need one to continue. It was clear what the princess was thinking, and the young man responded to it on instinct.
That wasn't you, princess. We all know it. If only ponies could see things that way. But you are wrong. Despite what our sister is so fond of repeating, those sins are ours to bear.
Well then, I guess you have to show every pony that you aren't her anymore.
That is the problem. 3 years of our best efforts, and yet a tiny slip is all it takes to wipe away our work. A mare called us by that name today. Nightmare. We nearly snapped at her.
Luna's eyes opened her eyes. To Das's silent horror, slitted pupils were revealed.
Perhaps we are still a nightmare.
Well, every pony gets angry sometimes, right? Das was totally aware that the grin he plastered across her face looked as fake as a flat tree. Anyway, all you've got to do is apologize.
Apologize? I doubt there are many who would accept.
I forgive you, princess. Luna shook her head, then looked at Rainbow straight in the eyes with her grim teal slits.
That's easy for you to say. What did I do to you, Rainbow Dash? Perhaps scare you a bit? Tempt you with glory if you would betray your friends?
The Princess of the Night blinked quickly, but the eyes that opened were both smooth and kind and filled with sorrow.
You know nothing of what I've done. Now, I can only beg for redemption.
The princess collapsed again over the railing. In a flat, unfeeling voice, she added last words.
You should leave, Rainbow Dash. Tell our sister we appreciate her attempt to cheer us up yet again. Perhaps you will leave us alone this time.
So you could sit here feeling sorry for yourself? No, not on my watch. I didn't get to be Equestria's most awesome pony by moping around. If you want every pony to stop thinking you as Nightmare Moon, you're going to have to go out there and do something that makes you see as Princess Luna instead.
And how do you propose to do that?
Well, isn't there a thing tonight? A party or something? Luna looked up, only to be distracted by the glass doors behind her sliding open silently, welcoming a stiff unicorn butler, floating a tray with 2 cups of tea.
Courtesy of the princess,
the stallion offered, setting down the tray between them. His next action was to back away while bowing stiffly, as if her spine was only at a single hinge. Luna didn't offer him a glance, but her horn did ignite with magic, lifting both cups and holding one before Dash, even as she moved the other toward herself. Dash took her own cup between her hooves and stared at it, hesitantly. She hated tea. It was an egghead drink, and even if reading had proved to be cool sometimes, tea certainly wasn't getting any tastier. She takes cider any day, even water. What was the point of ruining perfectly good water with leaves and dirt, and flowers, and whatever else they put into those bags anyway? This particular cup of tea did certainly smell good, however. It was a golden amber color, probably the result of the golden lining of the cup itself, floating in the steaming liquid that was a beautiful flower that seemed to be made of solid gold. An eerily familiar golden flower. Daz looked up with a realization and horror, dropping her cup. She lunged forward, launching a hoof of Princess at Luna's drink. Princess, don't! The moment of hesitant in Luna's sip was all it took to send a second beautiful porcelain cup crashing against the floor, where it shattered into shards of bladed gold and porcelain.
What are you doing?
Poison! Daz answered in a shout. Her attention had already turned to the inside of Luna's chambers, where the unicorn manservant had stopped, staring at the broken cups. Daz threw the door open without hesitation, and addressed the small stallion with a shout. Who are you?
Look at time, ma'am.
Is something wrong? You bet there's something wrong. What were you doing with that tea?
The tea?
The stallion quivered in place, his hair seemingly to grow grayer with every passing moment.
I always bring the princess her tea.
So you noticed something was different then?
The tea is always different. I don't make it, I just deliver it. Lieutenant Starr told me to bring it up, since the princess had a guess. I guess he met you. What was something wrong?
Where is he?
Down in the kitchen, last time
The words were cut off by a burst of wind Daz had left in her wake. Embossed ebony doors swung open, then slammed shut, only to be thrown open yet again. Wait! Lady Dash! Lady! The Pegasus turned in midair, came to a hover as Princess Luna stepped out the doors of her room.
Please, explain yourself.
Some pony tried to poison you. I only knew because... Dash shook her head when she remembered her urgency. I need to hurry if I want to catch this guy, Princess!
That is not your responsibility, Rainbow Dash.
It doesn't seem like any pony else noticed.
If you are certain that someone is attempting to poison one of us, go to Captain Armor. I will increase security for tonight's ceremony.
You're going to go? Even if some pony is trying to kill you?
How else can we show every pony who we are? Luna asked, with the slightest hint of a grin on her face. Thank you, Rainbow Dash.
Dash's answer was a cocky smile, before she took wing again, soaring out the nearest window and into the Canterlot sky. Shining Armor sat roughly at his desk, unarmored, with a quill scratching angrily on a scroll in front of him. Deficits, taxes, and pages of report had replaced battle for the captain of the Royal Guard. He knew he should be thankful for peace, but he felt wasted. His talent was protecting other ponies, not accounting. The room was spacious and welcoming, with chairs for other guards' ponies, and a wide desk of thick oak. The wall to his left was covered in the faces of his predecessors, looking down on him, silently judging the twitching of his quill. It was hard to imagine the faces framed in the paintings having sat for the paperwork he had to suffer. They were names of history books. Famous ponies like Sun Tzu and Iron Curtain had saved Equestria a dozen times over in their own days. Would he be remembered like they were? A pair of stiff knocks on his door shook off his reflection. Please, come in. Are you busy, sir? The voice belonged to Corporal Blue Chef, a regular who Shiny had placed in charge of management of headquarters. I said you could come in, didn't I? Still on the far side of the door, Blue Chef called back. I don't need to talk to you, sir. There's a man who insists on seeing you. Says it's important. It's to be for you only. Shining Armor peeked an eyebrow, though only his predecessor saw it. Is it my wife? No, some Pegasus. What's her name? Chef didn't answer. Shiny kept waiting until he heard the painful creak of a board 6 paces down the hall. At first, he attempted to have it fixed, but knowing when ponies were coming and going had proved itself to be useful more in ways than one. Certainly it made it easier to tell when any pony was trying to sneak in late for work. It took barely a minute for the creak to sneak through the halls of the guard headquarters again. Right on cue, Blue Stiff's voice called through the thick door to Shiny's office. Her name's Rainbow, sir. Rainbow Dash. Rainbow, send her in, Corporal. No sooner said than done. The door to Shining Armor slammed open, making way for a blue blur, which proceeded to slam the door shut again. In the process, Shining's jar of ink spilled on his desk, ruining his weekly crime report, and setting more than half of the pictures on the wall ajar. 2 even fell off. Finally! Celestia, that took forever! Stupid guard kept saying I had to file a bunch of reports, but I don't have time for that! Calm down, Rainbow, Shining Armor shouted, rising up onto his rear legs and bouncing with a forehoof on his desk. It was a surprisingly effective tactic, one that was usually reserved for when 2 groups at the scene were shouting at each other incoherently. He rarely had to use it on a single pony. Then again, Rainbow was very far from being most ponies. Good! Now please, calmly explain what's wrong. Dash took a deep breath, then expelled her thoughts at usual speed. Some pony tried to poison Princess Luna. I think it was her guard, Star something. Lieutenant Morningstar? Shining Armor cocked his head to the side. Yeah, I think that's it. He put those gold flowers from Princess Celestia's room into tea. I noticed right before she drank it. She said to come get you. Shining Armor hung his head, placed a hoof on his brow and thought. Come on, we gotta go. What are you waiting for? Please sit down, Rainbow Dash, he answered, gesturing to a chair. If this is really Star, he's still in the palace. The honor guard will catch him. Otherwise, there's no hurry. But he'll get away! If he leaves Canterlot, the wall post will know. We're in no hurry, so listen to me closely. I want you to stay here. What? But I... Did he only try to poison Princess Luna, Rainbow Dash? Rainbow's eyes grew wide, and her head pulled back in shock. She struggled for words. I didn't think so. Shining Armor's powerful muzzle rose up, and then fell just as slowly, in a deep breath. Where do I begin? There exists in Canterlot's main central structure, a room that the palace guards refer to as the Gauntlet. The reason for this appellation would not be at all clear for some pony visiting the room to deliver mail, say, on a tour. It's a tiny office, four smooth white walls, a finely furnished but plain mahogany door, and a four-paned window. The space between these walls was filled with an entirely normal office. A short chair, a desk with a healthy scattering of organized paperwork, and a handful of gray feather quills serves to indicate the business quality of the area. The only things to set the room apart from the office of an average bureaucrat was a wall covered in portraits. A small pot of ivy by the window, and a black lacquer helmet sitting on a mount in the corner, collecting dust. Despite its appearance, the room was one of the very few things that was scaring the heck out of me. I approached the room quietly, and stopped just outside the door. Inside was the only pony who could be considered my superior, so are the princesses themselves. They call him the commander, and so did every pony else. I pushed my way into the room slowly, where I found the commander staring down at a pile of paperwork at the desk before him. He's an aging Pegasus, though still young enough to fight, and the stories of his troops were to believe. His mane and fur were a short gray blue, though the former had begun to show considerable favoritism towards gray. The slight perking of his ears made it clear he was aware of my presence. He didn't even look up. Technically, he and I are of equal rank. I'm captain of the Royal Guard, while the commander was captain of the Honor Guard. However, there would be not much point to the word technically if the situation reflected the realities of the situation. In this case, those realities were that I was the newest of the captains to join the four branches of the EUP, and the commander, well, even the other captains called him the commander. I didn't even know why. There were some questions you didn't ask in the guard, and some ponies you didn't ask them too. Sir, I paused for a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves. I got your message. Was there something you wanted to talk to me about? A snort escaped the stallion's nostrils, before he slowly settled out of his chair and down onto his hose.
Yes, Captain Armor.
The commander stepped down from behind his desk, with what was an obviously painful limp in his right rear leg, giving me a scroll bearing Celestia's royal seal.
2 of my officers have discovered a likely plot against the princess.
Celestia or Luna? It was a question I had learned to ask in the time since the latter's return, though it was still a large change from the way I had been brought up. Clearly, the same feeling echoed in the commander's mind, as his eyes narrowed ever so slightly at the question.
They anticipate an attack on Celestia from inside the guard.
A guard is going to attack Celestia?
I love that.
The commander answered, without the short pause that would suggest he was joking. When Shiny's face betrayed his worry over the comment, the elder stallion continued.
It would be simple. Celestia is more than a match for any trader's guards pony, even if they manage to get past my guard.
The commander turned towards the window.
No, I suspect that the threat is to somebody close to the princess. Some pony more vulnerable.
Twilight is coming to Canterlot today. The commander's gaze snapped back, his glare growing more pronounced. Incrimination was written across his face.
How did you get the princess's schedule?
She's my sister. A silence that could only be born of awkwardness hung in the air. Finally, the commander's frozen gaze thawed.
We're thinking the same way, it seems. See to it that your sister and her companion are protected.
I nodded before delivering a swift salute. I'll put my best forces on it, sir. The commander's face was deadly serious.
Can you trust your best forces? I called you personally because I want you, personally, to protect them. Don't salute, ever!
Shiny put down his four-hose slowly, then turned, leaving the presence of the commander behind. It hadn't been as frightening as he expected, but it was easy to see why the stallion could command so much respect. The way he spoke demanded loyalty, even if it grated on emotions. The commander's words slowly wormed their way into the hole left behind by my anxiety without making a first impression. Out in the hall, a pair of passing guardsmen saluted me. I knew one, Sharp and Quill by name. She had grown up down the street from me in Canterlot. Could she portray the princess? What about all the other ponies I didn't know nearly so well? It would be a long walk to the barracks. The thought of traveling past so many of my own troops, wondering just which ones I could trust, was a prospect that grew darker and more terrifying with every passing moment.
and escaped my anxiety over the aging guards pulling in the room behind me.
So that's why you were in the park waiting for us?
Yeah. The stallion rose from his chair and paced to the corner where a coat of amethyst armor was waiting. And now I'm glad I was.
You think he's after me? Why? I mean, I understand Twilight, but why would Celestia care about me?
Because you're one of the elements of harmony? Because you're important to Equestria? Because you're vulnerable? Shining Armor shook his head. We have psychiatrists trying to get in the minds of criminals. I just protect every pony I can. And right now, that means you need to stay here.
Dash shook her head violently. No way! I'm not waiting for anybody to try and kill me again!
Shining Armor lowered his eyes. This is a guard matter, Rainbow Dash. If you came with me and something happened, well, to start with, I have a very hard time looking at Twilight or the princess in the eye ever again.
I'm not going to get hurt. I can take care of myself.
I'm not so sure I can afford to trust you on that. Shining Armor pushed the door open to his office. Please wait here. If you need food or something, get Blue Shift to help you.
Then the captain of the Royal Guard, clad in his namesake armor, strode out into the door. He failed to notice the mischievous grin that settled onto the mare he left behind. He did notice when his door failed to swing shut behind him. Shining Armor, do you trust Blue Shift?
What? It seems like a preposterous question. I guess. He's only been with the force a few months, but he seems like a good colt. Why do you... The captain's voice trailed off into nothingness, as his eyes grew ever so slightly wider, and his head slowly turned to look down the hallway of his headquarters.
Then it's settled, Dance answered, stepping up next to him. Where to?
Shining Armor's skin crawled, as he struggled to settle the sick feeling in his stomach that sometime soon, something was going to go horribly wrong.